Let's shift gears and talk about how you got started on this journey. Let's go before the startup journey even started. What did you hate the most about working at big tech?
Yeah, so I think at big tech, a lot of folks, and maybe this is generalization, but for folks who have been in big tech for a long time, they end up forming a little bit of an entitlement mentality where you join a big tech company, maybe they're doing really hot, and you think that you kind of deserve it. There's almost this idea of like being born on third base and thinking you've hit a triple.
Hmm.
Um, and so it really becomes less about how do I provide the best customer experience? How do I really ensure that I'm building products that people love? And it becomes much more of like, how do I ensure I get my next promotion? What do I need to do to juice these numbers and get to a point where people will actually start to take me seriously as a leader? And so the game changes, and it's less about really driving the business forward and much more of how do you drive your own career forward. And I always thought that was a little weird. I think it just goes against sort of internal founder instinct to always want to like solve problems for people and have impact through product itself.
Let's talk startup founder versus startup early employee. Isn't an early employee just someone doing the same amount of work, but with significantly less equity?
I don't think so. So I think normally the best early employees tend to have some ulterior motive for joining a startup beyond the equity itself. So like for some folks, joining an early stage startup gives them the opportunity to flex on responsibilities and do more in a shorter amount of time than they would be able to at a normal job. And so like, you know, a great example of this is our founding engineer. She's a former accountant who taught herself how to code, was working at a big tech company before she joined us. And one thing she felt was that her opportunities to grow as an engineer and an engineering leader were hampered because of the title, the level she was at, and the team she was on. One interesting quote I remember from her was, she said, you know, I've never had to fix a bug because no one ever reported a bug in my code. And I know that I'm not a perfect engineer. It just means no one actually used what we built. And so like, I think, you know, when you hear stories like that, you realize that for people, it's more than a job. It's the ability to like up level and upskill themselves and giving themselves the permission to do that instead of waiting for permission from someone else. I think for other early employees, some folks are just naturally like drawn towards a space that they care deeply about, and they know that they want to have impact in that space. Like, sure, you can make, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars working at Google on search, but if you don't care about search, you're really interested in like, you know, making the world a better place through grocery delivery or through like some sort of financial services, like you're just naturally going to gravitate towards that. And so, you know, it's easy from the outside looking in to kind of think that it's just someone who's doing the same amount of work, but without equity, but it's way more nuanced. And it's something we're always kind of trying to tease out in interviews is what is your motivation for joining, right? And like, is there alignment in the fact that like, you know, you'll be able to come in and really help us move the needle on what we want. And we're also able to do the same thing for you. And I think that's really important, is that we never want to attract people who are just like, this is my job, I'm here to work and like go home. We are always looking for a way that like, while people help us make Mercoa better, we're able to turn around and help our employees make their career journey better in some sort of way.
Why did you decide to start your own company? And I want to hone in on the why here.
There's two parts to this. The easiest part is, you know, I saw this opportunity at Bill.com. I saw that no one was paying attention to it. We wrote it off internally. And, you know, at the same time, we had billion-dollar companies asking us for this product itself. And so when I saw that, I was reminded of this quote that like, employment is a market for lemons, right? If the opportunity your employer is exploiting is truly immense and valuable, then you're better off pursuing it yourself. And so like, for me, that was kind of the immediate reason for wanting to start my own company. But beyond that, like my co-founder and I have been building B2B products for the last 10 years. And I think one thing we both have found is that the joy you get from customers using something you've built, seeing the Stripe notifications come in for people paying you for something you've built, far outclasses getting a notification that you've received a paycheck. And like, it's a little bit of hubris, maybe, but like, I have yet to find something in a business setting that gives me more of a rush than that.
Do you remember who said the quote, or did you come up with that?
I don't know who said it. It wasn't me though. I wish I could. I wish I could come up with a quote that great, but no. I can find out.
What was the opportunity cost for starting this startup? Foregone salaries, invested stock, whatever it may be.
Yeah, so it's ironic. Both my co-founder and I, we joined our respective companies when they were at all-time high valuations. Both of our organizations had taken a huge haircut, and that resulted in more than like a 50% drop in valuations. So in my case, like my stock was completely underwater at Bill. And for Sandeep at Stripe, Stripe took a huge haircut on their valuation as well. And so ultimately the opportunity cost of staying at our jobs was higher than quitting and going to start Mercoa.
But then again, after the haircuts that we've seen in recent years, maybe you do hear that more and more.
Yeah, I think we're in, a bit of uncharted territory, at least in my career journey. Like I've never been through a true down cycle. And so who knows, maybe we're just the start of a trend.
Let's talk about role models or the entrepreneurs we look up to. Which entrepreneur do you look up to the most?
Yeah, so for me personally, I look up to the Gusto CEO, Josh Reeves. Working at Gusto, that was my second job out of college, and it was the first organization I joined where the founders had a crystal clear vision, not only of the product that they were building, but also the business they wanted to build. So from day one, the idea wasn't that, hey, there's this huge cash grab and it's about getting as much money in the shortest amount of time. It was that we're building a business that is going to last for decades. And to do that, we have to build with a systems first approach. And I think one quote that I've kind of carried away from that experience is that heroes today become martyrs tomorrow. And so really what that means is like, if your employees, right, founders are always different, but if your employees are resorting to heroics to get work done, crazy all-nighters, doing a bunch of stuff where they're putting their health on the line at the expense of the business, like those aren't sustainable practices, and they ultimately will lead to that employee either burning out, putting themselves in a poor health situation, or ultimately, making just short-sighted decisions for the business itself. And so like, that's something I think about all the time is like, startups are a journey that's measured in decades, even though things can change very quickly in a matter of years. And so, that's really, I think, what I admire about Gusto is just the way that and Josh himself is the way that he's built that business is just so purposeful. And it's something that I think is inspiring and refreshing because you don't hear it from a lot of founders.
What type of people do you think are unfit to be founders?
Yeah, so I actually think, everyone is fit to be a founder of like the domain that they're an expert in, right? So like really it's a matter of like founder market fit being the most important. But with that being said, if you're the kind of person who's like chasing fame, publicity, like that big teams, whenever you think of an idea, you think about all the people that you need to hire immediately to make that happen. This might not be the journey for you, right? Like I think there are some folks who get really caught up in like, I want to start a startup one day because they're reading TechCrunch, they're seeing all the cool valuation news, seeing how much money people are raising. But the reality is that like, you maybe do that like 10% of the time. And then the remaining 90% of the time is like the grind, right? Talking to customers, facing rejection on a daily basis, and continuing to persevere and go through that. And kind of embracing it, right? It's really like the boring kind of unsexy stuff that ultimately leads to those 10% headlines.
Well, let's double click into the 10% headlines. What
Yeah.
else within it do you look forward to the most in your startup journey?
Yeah, so I think the thing that I'm really personally looking forward to the most is where team members who join Mercoa will end up and how they impact their next organization. So like, we see this with folks like the PayPal mafia, right? I think one thing that I'm really looking forward to and hoping for is a Mercoa mafia one day where folks are able to leverage the experiences and the perspectives they gained here to start new businesses and go solve new problems and go after new opportunities.
Love it. What's the most embarrassing startup story you have?
Yeah, so I I like still cringe about this, which I see as a sign of growth, but still very cringy. I was talking to someone about accounts payable, and I mentioned that, oh, AP is like the redheaded stepchild of fintech, and his lighting was a little bad, and so I didn't realize that he was actually a redhead, and so he called it out, and he was like, "Hey, like you might not want to use that quote with someone who's an actual redhead." And at that point, I was just hoping that he didn't tell me he was also a stepchild.
How'd you recover from that?
Apologizing profusely and really just trying to be as humble about it as possible. Ultimately, I think, I just addressed it head on. It was like, look, like, I'm sorry. I it sounded like an excuse to be like, I couldn't see it in the light, but really it was that of just like, look, I'm really sorry about that. Like, that's completely unprofessional. And like, it's one of those things I'm probably never going to do again.